The coffee my husband made didn't smell right, so I gave it to my mill instead. The smell hit me before I even lifted the cup to my lips. It was faint, bitter, and almost metallic, something a normal cup of coffee should never carry. My husband, Daniel, had handed it to me with that tight, forced smile he often wore these days, the one that didn't reach his eyes. I hesitated, staring at the swirling steam, my instinct screaming that something was wrong. Across the table, my mother-in-law, Evelyn, sat in her usual chair, her sharp tongue ready to lash at me over the smallest thing. She smirked as if she already knew something I didn't. And in that split second, I made a decision I'd never imagined myself making. I switched cups. For years, Evelyn had made my life unbearable. She moved in with us shortly after Daniel and I got married, claiming she was too frail to live alone. But frail was the last word I would use to describe her. She controlled Daniel, belittled me at every chance, and treated me like an outsider in my own home. "You'll never be good enough for my son," she would sneer, even when I cooked, cleaned, and bent over backward to please them both. Daniel never defended me. Instead, he grew colder, retreating into himself, leaving me alone to face her cruelty. That morning, when Daniel set the coffee down, something in his eyes chilled me. It wasn't love. It wasn't even indifference. It was calculation. I forced myself to smile, hiding my racing thoughts. Evelyn snatched the cup without hesitation when I slid it toward her, raising it to her lips with that smug superiority she always carried. Daniel's expression flickered, just for a moment, as if he hadn't expected me to do that. 20 minutes later, the chaos began. Evelyn's face went pale, her breathing shallow. She clutched her chest and gasped, the mug crashing to the floor. Daniel leapt up, panic flashing across his face, but I stood frozen, my own mug still untouched, my hands trembling. Deep down, I already knew the truth. Whatever was in my cup had been meant for me. The ambulance came quickly. Evelyn survived, though the doctors said she had ingested something harmful, traces of poison mixed into her drink. The hospital staff called the police. Questions swirled around us like smoke, but Daniel couldn't meet my eyes. His hands shook as he tried to explain, fumbling with words, blaming old medications, saying it must have been an accident. But the weight in my chest told me otherwise. The investigation stretched on for weeks. Detectives came, asked questions, bagged evidence. I replayed that morning over and over in my head, remembering Daniel's cold gaze, the strange bitterness in the coffee, and Evelyn's shocked expression before she collapsed. Finally, the truth spilled out under pressure. Daniel had been planning to get rid of me. The woman he once claimed to love had become a burden, someone he thought he could replace. Evelyn, despite her cruelty, had been nothing but a pawn in his twisted plan. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Evelyn had ever said to me. I had married Daniel believing in a future filled with love, but instead I was living in a house of lies and resentment. Yet, in a cruel twist of fate, his attempt to silence me had nearly taken down the woman who had been his greatest ally. Evelyn returned home after her recovery, weaker, quieter, her sharpness dulled by the brush with death. For the first time, she looked at me not as a rival but as a woman who had suffered under the same roof of deception. It was strange, almost unthinkable, but she began to treat me with something close to respect. Perhaps nearly dying had opened her eyes to the truth of her son's darkness. The police took Daniel away in handcuffs one gray afternoon. I watched, from the doorway, numb, as he shouted excuses, claiming it wasn't what it looked like. But I knew, and he knew I knew. In the silence that followed, I finally felt something I hadn't in years, freedom. It wasn't easy to rebuild. The shadows of betrayal clung to me, and nights were long and restless. But I discovered strength I didn't realize I had. I learned that sometimes survival means listening to that small voice inside, the one that whispers when something isn't right. That voice saved my life. Evelyn and I never became friends in the truest sense, but we developed an understanding. She no longer attacked me with her words, and I no longer carried bitterness for her cruelty. We had both been victims of the same man's choices. In an odd way, we became allies, bound by the truth that nearly destroyed us. Looking back, I realized that moment with the coffee was more than just instinct. It was fate, forcing me to see the reality I had been blind to for so long. That strange smell in the cup changed everything. It ended a marriage built on lies, exposed a dangerous truth, and set me free from both a cruel husband and the weight of his mother's scorn. And if there's one lesson I carry with me every day, it's this: never ignore your intuition. Sometimes it's the only shield you have against the ones who smile while holding poison in their hands.